Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and Happy New Year. I hope everybody had a good holiday season. And here we are in 2022, and lamentably, we're still talking about COVID. So I suspect it's top of mind for many people. Campus, as you can imagine, is continuing to work towards our projected beginning for the spring semester here the third, fourth week of January. And at the same time, we continue to monitor and communicate with our central office colleagues about what the planning is for the spring semester, and in particular, trying to navigate the next 2 weeks where we expect the surge to continue to be a challenge to us. I assume everybody has received and or read the email from the chancellor. Was sent out a little after 5 last night. He provided some updates. I think probably the most relevant one to many of you is the in-person work change. So originally, you received email from us at Lehman indicating we wanted to start seeing people come back around the 19th so that we could prepare for the spring semester. The email last night said that we will continue with the current capacity guidelines through February 25th, and that starting on Monday, February 28th, staff members will work 70% of the time in person. This alters somewhat the 70-30 plan that we've been working with. At the present, I have not received any further clarification or direction that we are moving away from instruction at 70-30. I did ask the question. I'm sure I'm not the only president to ask the question, not because it was on the table, but because it's not explicitly called out in the in-person work component of the memo. So as far as I know, as of 4 o'clock today, the in-person work assignments for staff will move to 70% on campus beginning Monday, February 28th. But the instructional plan to do 70% face-to-face instruction will begin with the commencement of the spring semester. As that changes or gets clarified or modified, we will communicate as quickly as we can out to the campus. The other thing is that we have continued to work and press the central office, and they're aware of the reasons why we're pressing for both expanded testing hours and the possibility to do vaccinations on sites, and to make sure that they're at times that would be useful to our staff and our students. We are getting a little bit of pressure as well from borough leaders and city councilors to be a hub for vaccination for the community. I don't know that we're going to be able to pull that off. That's a conversation that the chancellor and his staff can have with the mayor and the head of the council. Our immediate focus is on testing availability and vaccination availability for our faculty, staff, and students as we move into the spring semester. The other thing that I need to apprise you of is we continue to do some refinements on some of our buildings. So there are ongoing projects that will be done in the next couple of weeks in Gillette and Davis. They are part of issues that were identified in the fall, both at the beginning and at the end, and they are necessary improvements to make sure that being in those buildings is as safe as we can possibly make them. So we had to procure some additional pieces of equipment, and they are being installed now. And hopefully sometime by the end of next week, we'll probably be testing them and making sure that they all work. That's the major updates that I can confirm in terms of new things for the spring semester. I'll be honest that some of what was in the chancellor's letter to the CUNY community caught me off guard. There were things that we had discussed, or the chancellor had discussed with the Council of Presidents earlier in the week that weren't in the memo, and there were things that we did not discuss that found their way into the email memo. That's fine, but again, it's put me a little bit on my heels because I had not anticipated some things that were in there. And if somebody were to ask me, so what is the reason for X, I would not be able to give you an accurate reason. I could only give you conjecture, and I would hesitate to give conjecture because that would be probably inconsistent with any other president's conjecturing, and we might all be equally but differently incorrect in terms of what was the motivation for components in the chancellor's message to the CUNY community. The percentage of classes is still sitting at 70%. Some colleges are below that. Hostos was bold enough to say where they were at, and they were slightly above 68% as of Monday. We continue to monitor this, and I think we may have a condition here where we may need to add some additional seats and sections online. And I've been in conversations with the provost and Vice President Sarmiento about how we might go about doing that. It's probably a conversation I'll need to follow up with one or both of them either later on tonight or tomorrow. It's not optimal to be adding these classes at this late juncture, obviously, but it might be something that we need to bite the bullet and do. And if it pushes us, a tick below 70%, as I've said before, I'm willing to have that conversation with the central office and explain why we felt compelled to do that. We've not gotten a comprehensive analysis shared across the system for where people are at. I'm sure that the vice chancellor's offices are keeping a scorecard. Most schools that I've been in contact with over the last month are at or slightly above 70%, but I'm sure that there are either some graduate schools or professional schools and 2 or 4 year institutions that are somewhat below that 70% threshold, just based on some of the challenges that have been reported previously. And then in terms of what we will try to do, I think what we would like to do is to create as much stability with the face-to-face as we can. So there may be situations where we have classes that are typically defined as low enrolled, and they might otherwise be subject to canceling. And even if we add a parallel class online to make sure that we have adequate seats online if necessary, we would likely still keep the class that's face-to-face on the books. Now, if there's no enrollment in the class, that would be a different situation. But if there's some enrollment, we wouldn't necessarily walk away from those students. And I was going to answer the question about Gillette, but I see our moderator has already put that answer in there. So I'll move on from that particular question. And to the question about how we're going to handle having students and faculty be teaching at a 70% threshold, where our staff is at a 50% threshold for essentially the month of February. That is a good question. That is a question that I asked earlier today. And I just simply want clarification as to does that mandate to delay the 70% return to work, is that only staff? And in what ways does that impact, because it may not, the 70% goal for instruction? If we hold with the 70% goal of instruction, then what I will do in the next week is convene our leadership team and talk about critical areas and prioritizing work, because I do get concerned when we're inviting that many students back to campus, that many faculty back to campus. There are certain offices that are just key to supporting the instruction and the behavior of the students and the needs of the faculty as they go through their days, and try to figure out how we best do that during the end of January and through the month of February. But first, I want to get clarification that I'm understanding the memo and what it says and doesn't say accurately. And then I've got a question here from James that I want to pick up from Dean Mann. You know, since August, we've been working at supposedly at 50%, and I know that has been variable. My position at this point is whatever we've been doing, we'll continue to do as we get into February, and as we think about faculty returning, staff returning. We might want folks to think about coming back to their offices a day or two early to make sure everything is up and running. Unfortunately, having people return to work on Monday, the 28th, upsets a little bit of the plan that we had for this month, which was to have staff and faculty come back a few days early, if for no other reason, just to check and make sure that their computers are updated, that their spaces are adequate, that we don't have to make any contingency plans because of how people are staffed in spaces, and whether or not everything that they need to do their job works, particularly in areas where people really haven't been on campus for a year or more. Unfortunately, with this change, we're not going to really necessarily have that beta week where it's quiet. We're going to be inviting staff at a more robust level to come back to campus while we're in the midst of what we're doing. And so that's going to be an interesting thing to balance. And I'll be having a long conversation with Ron Bergman about any concerns he has about technology at that point in the semester, and having to work with folks, and at the same time to have a conversation with the deans about how we might mitigate any disruptions. And as to the question about the vaccine mandate, all I know at this point is that the vaccine mandate extends to faculty. I am under the impression that CUNY Central and the chancellor and its labor management team are meeting with the various collective bargaining units to assess whether or not that mandate would be extended to all employees. At this point, I don't have a clear answer because they've not given us any updates or information about how those conversations are unfolding and what that timeline might look like. One of the questions that the president's had related to that is, if we have that mandate, will we increase our capacity on campuses to be points of service for vaccination if that's necessary? Because I don't think we're necessarily going to be overrun, but I think it's important to consider our responsibility in being a part of the solution if we want everybody to be vaccinated. And certainly we would stand ready to make spaces adjacent to or on our campus available to do vaccinations, even if it's with a vendor who has a portable setup station. And as to the question about PPE availability, again, that's a question I'll be taking up with the cabinet. There seems to be some growing information and conversations being sort of shared across higher education about different kinds of PPE, different kinds of masks. And I don't know what those supply chains look like. And I don't know if we as an individual CUNY institution can go our own way on this, but I'm going to try to get some answers here in the next couple of days. The question about students and boosters, that's still an open question. There had been some conversation about moving more aggressively towards boosters. I believe in the chancellor's email, he encourages students and staff and faculty, any of us who are fully vaccinated, to get boosters when we're eligible to get boosters. And so I am under the impression that folks at the central office can track when people, 5 months or 6 months, depending on what vaccination protocol you followed, would be available. I just don't know right now if there's just simply keeping that information, or if they're going to distribute that information or push it back to the campuses for us to communicate to individuals in a more proactive way to encourage them as they come up on their deadline to get a booster at this point, and this could change. That memo doesn't indicate that boosters are mandated. I think the focus right now is on continuing to increase student vaccination rates, now faculty vaccination rates, and this ongoing conversation about staff mandated vaccination. In terms of the new in-person guidelines in place with the new minimum number of students required to register, I think in the past we might have said anything below 5 or 7 was subject to closure. I think we're going to be a little bit more liberal about that. That's where we left the discussion earlier this week with cabinet. Even if we open up, as I said, that parallel class online, I think we've tried to make a commitment to our employees to try to create as much stability as we could in this time. And I think we've tried to make that commitment to our students to try to create as much stability and opportunity as we could. But I do think that there would likely be some classes that have negligible or no enrollment that would be subject to close. And I'm sorry, I was just distracted. I just got a text from one of our cabinet colleagues who noted that Lehman, in its best planning, has once again stockpiled PPE. So it seems like we're in a better place than maybe some of our sister institutions. Julie, I don't see anything in the documentation that right now requires them to upload the booster information by January 19th. And in fact, we had students as recently as 2 weeks ago complete their vaccination sequence to be eligible to register and attend classes beginning in the spring semester. So, projecting forward, depending on what they got, their vaccination deadlines could be as far out as early to mid-April. So it's going to vary tremendously. And I think that's one of the challenges that we as an institution or the system is going to have, because it's not going to, if a booster mandate comes down the road, it's not going to be the same for everybody. It's not necessarily going to be every day, but it's going to be all over the place. And we'll have to take that into account. The other thing that a number of us pointed out is that it appears during the holiday break that the availability of vaccines and the availability of test kits varied across boroughs and even within boroughs. And in some circumstances, sites that do give vaccination are having their own staffing problems. So even if they have a supply, they don't necessarily have the personnel to serve people across their service day. And so I left a question about whatever these mandates might be, whenever they come, and whatever these deadlines might be for the boosters, at what point do we contemplate a good faith effort to try to get a booster if one is not available, and how far should we push ourselves in our campus communities to go get boosters? I mean, do we expect somebody from the Bronx to go up to Midwestchester or go to Queens, or from Queens go to Manhattan in search of these boosters? So I think there's a number of complicated questions that really are still out there with respect to what a preferred policy might be from the city or the state, and really what the supply chain can withstand if hard deadlines are the preferred route. And I do think you would have to upload your booster information to CUNY first. And I, honestly, I kind of feel bad that instead of welcoming you to a new year and a wonderfully positive beginning to the spring semester, we're yet again having a conversation about the uncertainties and the vagaries about COVID and our state and local responses to what COVID is. It's certainly not not something any of us wanted to contemplate, but here we are. The other thing that we did hear very clearly from the chancellor is that as data continues to come in, they are monitoring it very closely at the central office. And if the data warrants, in consultation with the governor's office and the mayor's office, for us to pivot and go remote as a system, we will do that. What we are not allowed to do as an institution is to make a blanket policy to say we are going online. And so any conversations related to staffing shortfalls or isolation rates or infection rates need to be shared and discussed with the central office. If the central office needs to make an exception for a specific campus or location, that is a conversation they will have with us. But we are not in a place where Lehman can simply say, we've looked at our own data and we've decided based on our own data, we're going to make a blanket policy statement and go remotely. That is not a decision that is allocated to the campus or to me as the president. At best, we would have an opportunity to have a conversation with the central office. The central office is aware that Lehman has already, during this surge, post-New Year's, some critical areas where we're concerned about our staffing rates. We're not the only ones that have this concern. And we are keeping them apprised on a weekly basis. And if I get a recommendation that there are certain services or certain parts of the campus or certain buildings that cannot be occupied or used, or we cannot offer as much access to the campus, that is a conversation I will have with the chancellor and the vice chancellor at CUNY Central. And based on that advice and consent, then we'll make a decision. But it's not a decision we can make unilaterally. And to the question of if a faculty member were teaching a class face-to-face and were to test positive, would that mean that they could switch their class online until they have a negative test or otherwise cleared? I think the answer is yes, correct. I think the one caveat there is the condition in which that faculty member is in. Some people get COVID. It's a mild to moderate annoyance, and to others it can be more acute. And so, yeah, I think we need to be careful with that. But yes, absolutely. I mean, the online solution in case we have disruption is an option. And in terms of the rapid testing, the CUNY continues to say that the test that counts to get clearance to campus is the one that is contracted through CUNY, that is available on, I think, 21 sites, including Lehman. While those home and rapid test kits have potential value in terms of diagnosis, and clearance, it is the CUNY testing protocol that needs to be followed and uploaded. And so I apologize to anybody who kind of feels awkward about a double testing. But that's the mandate that we have, that the official CUNY test is that which gives you clearance to campus. And Ruth, yes, all of us on the senior management team, we have also been working on our 4+3, 5+2, 70% plans by being visibly present on campus most of the time. I personally, when I come on campus in the next month, will make it an effort, despite my other physical limitations, to get out of the office and walk around. It's obviously complicated when we're on campus and people are in offices, but perhaps people might feel more comfortable interacting when we're outside. So I will do my best to not just simply be on campus, but be visible beyond the confines of my office and the 3rd floor of Schuster Hall. Julie, I'll have to get back to you on the air circulation on Carmen. Thank you for alerting. I know that we've continued to push people to sort of clear the hallways and to be mindful about going up certain stairwells and down other stairwells, so we don't have to police it as much as perhaps we think we do. But hopefully people are mindful that that the notion is to get in and through the building in the most efficient way as possible. And Dana, I wish I had a specific answer in front of you. I don't have it in front of me. I could possibly pull it up. Enrollments are not bad. Be candid, enrollments are down a little bit, including across the system. Some schools have a bigger dip than others. Let's see, I'm pulling up an enrollment report, and it suggests that net for winter, we're actually up this year over last year. So that's a good sign. And then as we roll into spring, we are down a little bit. And we're hopeful that we can continue to make up some ground as we move through the semester. One of the things that is of a little bit concern is that there are students who have requested these e-permits to seek classes elsewhere on another CUNY campus. That is meaningfully up over previous semesters, but we'll see where that lands, because just because somebody has secured a permit to take class elsewhere doesn't mean that ultimately they take that class. It's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge. I think the confidence that we have is that sooner or later we'll be out of COVID. And I think the greatest benefit that we have at Lehman is that the campus leadership team that I've inherited has worked in an environment where we've been cautious, and some might even say too conservative. But in these environments, being conservative with our finances now means that we can even out the rough edges of a meaningful but still moderate downturn in enrollment, and presume it's a blip, and still keep people on board and be able to fill in the financial gaps. Could we do that forever? Obviously, no, we couldn't. But can we weather the spring and even next fall? It would appear that we're in a strong enough financial position that we can do that. And Leslie, I'm focusing on a particular part of your question. Faculty students are exhausted, and increased clarity will help. I don't mean to be religious, but from your lips to God's ears. Like I said, I have been involved in some senior level conversations across the system, and I have to admit there were a couple of pieces in the email that came out yesterday that I was surprised, and so I'm still trying to catch up and try to figure out what did I miss, so that I can communicate that and perhaps provide the clarity and predictability that folks at our campus want to have. But absolutely, increased clarity would be helpful to all of us. And no, not everybody needs to be tested before they come to campus if they're fully vaccinated and have gotten the vaccination clearance. We are going to continue with random tests, even for those of us who are vaccinated, and that should continue through the entirety of the spring semester. I don't know how many people per campus are going to go through the random testing every week, but it is a significant number, as I recall. And you may be an employee or a student who goes through the entire spring semester and never gets randomly tested, and you may be somebody who gets tested more than once. But there will be a schedule for random testing. And obviously, if you feel like you've been exposed and and or feel symptomatic, then I would encourage you to go get the test. And Raphael, the idea is that Gillette Hall will reopen for spring semester. I will get back to you on the requesting a HEPA filter. And Ruth, in terms of what is the absolute number of people considered the on-campus population, that's a great question. Because I know the system has a head count for us because they're tracking our enrollments globally and per course, and they're tracking which courses are identified online. I'm going to ask them what total N they're using as the divisor for on-campus population, because I don't think it's absolute head count, because that wouldn't make sense because we don't have absolute head count every day. And yes, you will have to get clearance from the Lehman testing site in order to get back to campus. In terms of the seating distance, I have to review what the most recent CDC guidelines are, but that's clearly that, and state guidelines are what CUNY is going to follow. That's what we've been told we should continue to do, and that's been very clear. That's the position that CUNY Central will be pursuing. So if there's any modifications, we will update that. I will say that one of the concerns had been that the CUNY Central website needs to be updated, and some of the sort of older information needs to be taken down. So the chancellor's staff was aware of that, and I believe over the next week or so, they will be scraping and cleaning their CUNY Central COVID website so that only the most recent and updated information is available, and we don't invite some confusion with some older information. And to Dean Mann, the request has been made to expand the hours of operations for the testing center, and to consider expanding vaccination opportunities on our campuses. I believe the testing center still has been operating or planned to operate 22 to 24 hours a week. Most of the presidents suggested we need to be somewhere between 32 and 40 hours a week. I don't know if that's possible. Those contractors are also having their own staffing issues. So I don't know I don't know how far we've gotten down. We're certainly double checking with the folks at CUNY Central, but yes, we did ask them to add additional hours and to maybe flex their hours so that they're not just morning and afternoon, but morning, afternoon, maybe early evening, because we have different populations. Yeah, cafeteria services are coming back. I saw the email last week that the vending machines that we began in the fall semester with, and by the end of the term had shut down, they are coming back. So I think that's a good thing. We certainly will be encouraging social distancing and prudent use of masking and unmasking while you're eating. Unfortunately, winter works against us in terms of encouraging people to sit outside. But hopefully the combination of Farmer's Fridge, which is the company I mentioned, vending machines, and what we're offering in the dining spaces is enough to provide opportunities for people on campus to get lunch or food, and to also be distributed so they're not in a singular place. One of the things I still need to look towards with our team is, with still so many classes being non-face-to-face, can we recapture some spaces and use those as meeting and gathering spaces so we can encourage a greater spread of people, so people aren't just congregating in the more typical or comfortable common spaces, if you will, like the library or dining services where people tend to socialize, but can create more spaces across the campus indoors. So we don't have those pressures on a smaller number of spaces. Well, it looks like we have exhausted the questions. I'm sure more questions can come up in COVID. I'd like to bracket COVID for a second, because while COVID dominates a lot of what we do, it's not the only thing that we do. So I want to give you a heads up on a few things. One is that we have completed some messaging to Mackenzie Scott and her representatives about her gift, and probably more importantly to us, we continue to have the conversation with our outside consultants, with our leadership team, and with the foundation board about how we're moving forward with our campaign. And I think we're going to be in a place to move forward with the campaign at some point in the spring semester. There are a couple of things that we need to we need to clarify over the next couple of weeks, but I'm hopeful that we get to move into that space. We're already having meetings with folks about their interests and where their donations may go in terms of building out our endowment and supporting our students. And at the same time, we continue to have very robust conversations with legislators. So we have a legislative breakfast that we share. We share that with Hostos and Bronx Community College. And in a couple of weeks, I have to be in DC for a conference, and I'm using some of the time that I'm there to meet with some of our federal delegation about funding, particularly infrastructure funding, that hopefully will navigate its way successfully through the process in DC, both at the White House and Capitol Hill, and hopefully lead to money that is allocated, I assume, through the Department of Education. It could be earmarked to Hispanic serving institutions and minority serving institutions. And so we've identified a handful of initiatives that we think could be funded at that federal level. And obviously we have a Bronx-based delegation and a federal delegation from the state level that is interested in what we do in CUNY. And so we're hopeful that we can leverage that and find some additional funds. And to the question that just popped up, yes, there are conversations about an in-person graduation. My expectation is if we do it on campus, it'll be outdoors, and people who come to campus will need to be vaccinated. That's where I would think we would at. Now, there may be some variance with guests where what we will require in May is proof of a COVID-free test. But I'm guessing if we use the rules that we've been using in New York City since mid-September to get into events and event venues, it's proof of fully vaccinated status. But Antoine, I'm hopeful, like everybody else, that we actually have a real commencement and graduation ceremony, and that I'm actually able to meet a critical mass of Lehman students, which is something that I dearly miss while we've been in this last 6 months of my tenure here. Because while it's great to do Zoom and it's great to be on phone calls, it's clearly not the next best thing to being there. So I'm hopeful we get to a place where we've knocked back surges and circumstances warrant that we can have a robust graduation celebration on campus come May. To the question about vaccinated and uploaded into CF, you should be able to use your Lehman ID to access campus. So at 4:40, it looks like we've answered most of the questions that were outstanding. I want to thank you all for participating. There's more than 200 of you. I appreciate the questions. I share the frustrations, and and the aggravations of the lack of clarity, and maybe in some people's mind, the lack of timeliness. I have no doubt that people are doing their best to get answers, and it's complicated in all kinds of ways, I'm sure. But I recognize that for our campus community and what we're trying to accomplish, whatever is the noise that's going on in other boroughs or up in Albany, um, is merely a cacophony of sounds that just makes things that much harder to do and do our best at. And I very much appreciate everybody's patience and forbearance in navigating these spaces and times. And I do hope that we can move through the surge quickly and without too much illness. And I hope nobody in our campus community is harmed or even devastated in the ways, unfortunately, that we saw at Lehman a year ago. And that when we get to the end of January, we have the energy and the confidence to come back to campus and begin to be the institution we've always been, as opposed to this COVID-adjusted institution that is doing its best. But I am with everybody. I don't think anybody's enjoying what we're doing, even when we're doing our dead level best. So best I can tell you at this point is hang in there. Don't be surprised if there's more information coming out of the chancellor's office over the next week. There may be an occasion where he asks us as individual presidents to either amplify a message or send a direct message to our campus. We'll be prepared to do that and get it out very quickly. I just thank you for your time and your ongoing engagement. And I think we can wrap it up there. And I'll give you back your Thursday afternoon, and I guess we can sit back and see if we can get enough snow to make a snowball or a snowman or a snow person somewhere in the Bronx. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time.